Good afternoon, everyone. It is 1:01, and to honor everyone's time, I think we'll go ahead and get started. So I want to welcome you to FACT's Future of Distance Education Symposium. We are so happy to have you here today. I'm Debbie Klein, the president of FACT, and I just wanted to start by saying that I hope you are all hanging in there during these challenging times, and I hope your mid-semester is going as smoothly as possible. It's my honor and pleasure to be part of this timely event. And so I thought I would start with just a few words of reflection about this event. In a recent conversation with Candace Knudson and Carlos Mauri, who are the organizers of this event, I began to wonder if we could characterize what the California community colleges as a system is experiencing right now as a crisis of access on two fronts. On the first front, many students do not have access to the technology, skills, or information competency to succeed in their online courses right now. On the second front, many faculty do not have access to the technology, skills, and pedagogical training to successfully offer their courses in the online modality. So while these access and equity gaps were present before the pandemic has definitely shined a light on the systemic racism in our communities and our colleges, as well as the lack of support for faculty, our professional development and otherwise. So perhaps the silver lining is that we now have this sense of urgency, this fire in our bellies or fire under our feet to engage in these critical conversations and hopefully come up with some recommendations for action. So I'm really looking forward to these next few hours of dialogue. And now I would like to introduce Crystal Padilla, a student intern who has been working with FACT to mobilize our faculty and students around Props 15 and 16, which are potentially game changers for our colleges and our communities. Crystal recently transferred from De Anza College to Sacramento State University, where she's a political science major. Crystal discovered her passion and path for organizing while taking an online course. In addition to providing us with some information about Props 15 and 16, Crystal will also say a few words about her experience as a student and tutor in the online course that made such a huge difference in her life. So Crystal, please take it away.
Hi, thank you all. Thank you to the panelists for welcoming me and allowing me to speak to everyone today. Thank you, Debbie, for the wonderful introduction. As Debbie said, I was a community college student at De Anza College, and now I'm at Sac State. But while I was at De Anza, I chose to take online courses because I wanted to maximize the amount of time that I could work. So I was a full-time student taking online courses and a part-time employee working 20 to 30 hours a week. But I truly found my passion for what I'm doing now and thankful to be here because of a Poly 1 course I took online out of my choice. I took a Poly 1 course and it had many requirements that other classes did not have. But I believe that the structure provided by this online course is what kept me engaged. Right now, we're all experiencing a very tough time, especially with online courses. A lot of students that I'm speaking to and tutoring with are not finding inspiration to stay on the course and are not having that face-to-face contact with people or instructors, and they're feeling a little discouraged to keep on going. Like Debbie said, I am a tutor for actually that same Poly 1 course that I took over a year ago. And having that relationship with students one-on-one, I have an assigned set of students. I have 20, 30 students that I oversee, and I communicate them week by week just to keep them in the class and to keep them inspired and excited. So I'm very thankful for that Poly 1 course that brought me here today. The instructor that I had actually introduced me to an internship on campus. I applied and got in, and then I was put in contact with Debbie and Evan, everyone at FAC. And I'm very thankful for the work that we're doing this fall. We are doing outreach for Prop 15 and 16, yes, on both campaigns, and we're phone banking. We have about a week and a half left to do this work and to get these propositions passed. Prop 15 is Schools and Community First, and Prop 16 is Opportunity for All. And I would love to talk more about these propositions, but I know I have limited time. So if anyone would like to have a longer conversation about these propositions and why they're so important for our communities, I would love to have that conversation. Also, I would like to encourage all of you and invite you all to come phone bank with FAC and FAPAC. We're phone banking all this week and next week until November 3rd. And I'm going to put all my contact information in the chat if anyone would like to reach out to me and, phone bank with us, or if you would like to present this opportunity to any of your students. We are very student-based, so we are having like 20, 30 students at our phone banks. It's a very fun, welcoming environment. And I just want to invite all of you. Debbie, would you like to add anything, or would you like me to highlight any specific thing that I said?
Thanks for asking, Crystal. I think you were perfect as always, and that we should probably leave your information in the chat so everyone who wants to can reach out to you. You're absolutely amazing one-on-one at connecting people with the phone bank or text bank that they might want, or that they would want to send the link to their students so that our students can get involved. So no, thank you so much for being here, Crystal. And thank you all for being here and for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you all for having me and for welcoming me. And if anyone's interested in receiving more information about the propositions or would like to share this with their class, we do have asynchronous material that we can share out, or I can share out, that you can share with your students. Thank you so much for having me, and I hope you guys have a great webinar.
Thank you for that, Crystal. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Carlos Maruri. I'm a counselor at Compton College, and I am the Professional Development Committee Chair for FAC. So thank you all for being here today. Just to give you guys a quick little rundown on how the symposium is going to go. And you may hear interruptions from my children. Of course, as soon as I start talking, she decides to come in the door. I'm talking, give me 2 minutes. So how the symposium is going to go in the next hour and a half, we have some prepared questions that we're going to ask our panelists. We definitely want it to be conversational in nature. So panelists, please feel free to respond to one another and bounce ideas off one another. After each question, we will allow for 10 minutes of Q&A from the audience, so you don't have to hold your questions until the very end. The chat is open, but if you'd like a question answered, please use the Q&A feature to ask your questions. One of our staff members will be monitoring the questions, and we'll make sure to funnel those in at the appropriate times. I was peeking in the Q&A already, and I saw a couple of people curious about how to turn off your camera and audio. This is a webinar, so the only video and camera that you will see is from our panelists. So if you're worried about that, nobody can see you. And with all that being said, I would invite our panelists to introduce themselves, and we will start off with Candace Knudson.
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you, Debbie. My name is Candace Knudson, and I am a DE coordinator, a distance education coordinator for Sacramento City College, and I've been in that role for 6 years now. It seems shorter than that. It just flew by. And I have been a part of the FAC family, the Faculty Association family, for about 10 years and have been a part of this professional development committee, and I'm really excited to see this. So I'm also recently the CCC-DECO, the DE Coordinators Organization president, and I am really ecstatic about the importance of that organization in the future of distance education. So I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Candace. Cheryl Aschenbach is next.
Thank you, Carlos. Hi, everybody. My name is Cheryl Aschenbach, and I am a faculty member at Lassen College and secretary for the Academic Senate for California Community Colleges. I'm happy to be here with everybody and look forward to the conversations we're going to have.
All right. Jory Hadsell, please.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jory Hadsell. I am the executive director for the California Virtual Campus, also known as the Online Education Initiative. We are the collaborative organization that's been around for, again, about 6-7 years now, bringing you things like Canvas, the course design rubric, and a lot of collaborative distance education support for colleges. So thrilled to be here today and really looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Wendy Bass.
Hi, everybody. My name is Wendy Bass. I am the faculty co-chair of the CVC Consortium. I'm also the distance education coordinator at LA Pierce College, and I have been a DE coordinator for 15 years. So I've seen a lot of changes in the field in the last 15 years. So looking forward to being here.
Thanks, Wendy. And last but not least, Suzanne Wakim.
Hi, everybody. Suzanne Wakim. I'm at Butte College, where I am biology faculty as well as the DE-OER and SLO coordinator. I'm also part of the Academic Senate's OER initiative, and I facilitate for At One, so bringing in a few different things. Thanks.
Well, thank you all panelists. I appreciate you taking the time and being here today. And so let's get started with the first question. So, to what extent should progressive methodologies shape the future of higher education? What role do faculty have? And Candace, if you wouldn't mind starting us off, please.
Sure. You know, when I helped Carlos brainstorm these questions, I didn't really think that I didn't realize that I would have to also answer them. And so I thought I better prepare some remarks so to make sure that I stayed on target here. I want to make sure that everybody understands what a DE coordinator is. I think a lot of people on this webinar may not understand that fully. So the DE coordinator role on campus is typically, it's the strategic leader of distance education on campus, and sometimes the tactical leader. Sometimes they have to not only help strategize and sit at many tables, lead the whole campus, but sometimes they also have to deliver that with professional development, learning management support. So it's a very big role and a very important role. And that's why it's very important that we talk about DE coordinators and get them involved at the table here. So I want to talk a little bit about higher education in general. So faculty who have been teaching well online for a while know all about the impossibility of translating perfectly the on-ground class to the online environment. But those who've been involuntarily thrust into this pandemic pedagogy, this online teaching that we're doing now, are still trying to jam that square peg into the round hole. And students and faculty are suffering often because of it. We're all seeing that. We have tensions created from this over or inappropriate use of cameras, the struggle of how to create group activities, the unsuccessful assessments that don't translate well online, and the countless accessibility and technology problems, including improper or ill-informed use of digital tools, device problems, including the use of smartphones where a full computer is required, operating system and other software compatibility problems, broken devices, lack of broadband, and just plain lack of student and faculty technological skills. Many of our students are one broken screen or one lost power cord away from dropping a class or dropping out entirely. You know, it sounds like an exaggeration, but it's really not. We've all seen student situations like that. So we're just now in this pandemic starting to realize that many of our students lack the academic technology capital, the access skills, and the information knowledge to actually work well in the online environment. And I would argue that faculty sometimes lack those things as well. So what we've learned over the past couple decades of online education is that the online environment requires a different kind of ingenuity to create rich interactive learning environments for students. What we've learned in the history of higher education overall is that progressive methodologies often become standard practice. For instance, active learning and collaborative learning or group work has become fairly standard practice. Back in the day, it used to be a radical approach to do anything other than stand behind the podium and lecture for the whole class period. So similarly, in online education, yesterday's progressive methodologies are becoming today's standard practices. Open educational resources, group work such as wiki building and peer review, and many others that my colleagues here will likely mention. These are all common methods for the experienced online teaching practitioner. So today, the progressive methodologies such as OERs, open pedagogy, authentic assessment, trauma-informed pedagogy, universal design for learning, humanizing instructor presence are still pushing us forward. I see the development of all these methods as key to the authentic inclusion of all our students, not just those who have the academic technology capital to succeed easily in an online environment. And a lot of our data reflects this, as well as when we look at the demographics of who is taking online classes, we see that some demographics are less well represented, especially those that are the least well off economically. So these progressive methods are key to helping our disproportionately impacted students successfully manage the online environment and succeed. And I think this is our most important imperative. Certainly the chancellor has made this our imperative to close the equity gaps. And I think in this online world, that's where they're most exacerbated. So because it's faculty who innovate and develop and implement these methods and teach others why and how to use them, it's faculty who must own this responsibility. So I see the role of faculty in identifying, shaping, learning these new practices, implementing these new practices, and then sort of bringing along our colleagues and our institutions along the way. That's really the role that I see faculty playing in this. It's imperative.
It looks like the panelists are going to make me call on them to speak. So we're going to go with Suzanne.
Okay, sorry. I could have just jumped in. Yeah, so I think the way that I approach this question, looking at, what is the future of higher ed and distance ed, I think can be summed up in just one word, which is flexibility, right? So we learned this last semester that we have to be really flexible in cases of pandemics. But I'm from Butte College, so 2 years ago we had to be super flexible because of the campfire, and we're still having every semester since then. We've had power outages, right? So like flexibility seems to be the norm, and that I think is where we need to go. And this is true for both face-to-face and online classes, right? So even in our online classes, when everything went into lockdown or when we were dealing with fires, those had to adapt too, because our students were in a very different space, even though, technically nothing should have changed for online classes, but in reality, it really did. And, in the end, the flexibility is important in cases where, even though our semester may be fine and there's no, disaster happening for us, at any given semester, there are students out there that are dealing with life-changing semesters, and there's, they have their own emergencies. And so having classes that are built flexibly is going to be the key, I think, moving forward. And that ties into, one of the approaches to course design that I think is going to be really important as we move forward in looking how do we design these flexible classes is universal design for learning, right? So if you look at how universal design for learning is set up, it's all about flexibility. And in general, it talks about flexibility because of what the student needs as a person, but it also applies to what the student needs because of their environment, right? So for example, there's flexibility in how you present materials. And that can be with, students prefer video versus reading, but it can also mean high bandwidth versus low bandwidth if they're in a place where their internet isn't so good. Do we have print options that they can get and that they can afford, right? This is where OER comes in. Is it something that they could get their hands on, not just physically, but also can they purchase it? And then for assessments, also all about flexibility there is if you look at what students are meant to show, that's where you start looking at authentic assessments, right? Like what's the whole point of what we're trying to get them to do? How do we allow them to do that as best as they can? That I think can help us move away from some of this, tech solutions where really the solution needs to be how do we help students demonstrate what they can do? And so I could go on and on about UDL, but I won't. But I think the key that I just want to leave folks with is that we need to really start looking at how do we build flexibility into our courses.
I think I'm next, so I can just jump right in. I'm going to really concur what Candace and Susan both have said before me. as a DE coordinator, and I also teach online. So when everyone was doing the whole pivot, I was already online in the spring, but I had to make a lot of changes. And one of the things that I would say in terms of the future of DE and education and community college learning is technology is now here to stay. I think that all of these courses that have pivoted and have moved online, I'm not saying they're going to stay online, but I think most of these professors are going to keep using technology now that they have realized, wow, I can really reach a lot of students this way. And we want to make sure that they're using the technology and continue to be offered the technology in an equitable way for our students. One of the first things I had to do as a person that teaches online is I actually had to do my own pivoting, because in the past I've used online proctoring. And once we went remote, I was like, oh, wait a minute. Now we don't have, my students don't have access to necessarily to bandwidth. My students don't necessarily have access to laptops. In the past, I knew that there were labs on campus that my students can access almost 24 hours, like till 10 o'clock at night, the library was open and we had our proctoring service installed, our proctoring software installed on all of our library computers, plus all of our labs. So I knew our students had access to get into a lab if they needed to take an online exam, or even that they could get to a Starbucks or a Panera or somewhere to get free Wi-Fi. So once this happened and there was nowhere to run to get free Wi-Fi, I realized I needed to make a change for myself and my students. And I encouraged my faculty to as well. That's where authentic assessment really comes in. I think that we have to focus more on how are we teaching our students and how can we assess their learning instead of how can we catch them cheating? Because I feel like the conversation keeps going into the direction of, oh, I'm going to catch them cheating, I'm going to catch them cheating, instead of focusing on, wow, let's talk about how amazing our students are, that they are continuing to learn during this chaotic time. You may see the door behind me open up. I have kids at home too, and I'm lucky. I have one of my kids left, and so I have his room to use for to work in. But so many of our students are really grappling with trying to find space, as are our faculty. So our role is not only supporting the students, but it's also supporting the faculty and finding ways to, how can I create really interactive and engaging lectures for my students? Probably the number one thing advice I give to my faculty is don't do a 3-hour lecture. Aside from the fact that it's going to exhaust you, none of our students are going to listen to a 3-hour lecture. We need to break it down into incremental parts where if you do 10 minutes here and there, the students love listening to shorter lectures that they can absorb. So a lot of it is just teaching our students and ourselves kind of a new teaching methodology that's going to work. And I'm seeing it with my own kids who are all doing their Zoom schooling now too. I have high school students and they zone out by the end of the day. So it really helps us to realize what's too much information overload, what our expectations need to be. Does it mean we lower our expectations? Absolutely not. We still expect our students to be learning, but it's kind of our role to meet them. And so I just want to say that in terms of where I see this going, is I really want to focus on that. We really want to engage students. We want to engage faculty. Technology is going to continue to be here. And thank you to CVC for Canvas for all of us. The timing of it couldn't have been more beautiful. That we were all on the same platform is huge. Can you imagine if this was 5 years ago when every campus had different platforms, not even districts are on the same platform, what it would have been like. So just having us all on the same platform means we can share resources. And that's one of the things we've been doing also at the state level, is trying to encourage everyone to share resources by sharing what's working in their classes and doing that. So I'm gonna leave it to Jory now.
Sure. So many great things to follow there, Wendy. I don't know where to begin. So I guess I'll flip it a little bit and start with the faculty role. And I didn't say in my introduction, but former faculty myself, even though I've gone to the dark side and I'm an administrator now, but also taught online and face-to-face as well. I think faculty's role is, you're innovators, obviously. Faculty are drivers of change and stewards of our institutions, of quality, of effective pedagogy. I think also, and this just strikes me right now in the times that we're in, I think sometimes faculty are stability. This is like one constant in students' lives when everything else may be in flux. So I think, kind of following up on the theme that was discussed around authentic assessment, I think that begins with authentic presence in the class, letting your students see that you're a real person. You know, @ONE has done a lot around humanizing, which is incredible, but just being real, you know. And when I logged on for this webinar today, I wasn't sure, you know, should I use a virtual background? Should I not? I kind of wanted to see what the sense of the other presenters was going to be. And Wendy, I love that you're in your son's bedroom. You know, I have right now 3 kids. I have an elementary, a middle, and a high school are all doing distance learning right outside my door, right in their different spaces, which we're fortunate to have. So it's just be real with your students and be that constant for them. And what part of what that means is, I think when we talk about authentic assessment, that can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people, but getting away from the surveillance culture and more toward assessment methodologies that really, I think, measure students' progress more incrementally as well as more authentically, right? So that we move away from higher stakes measurement and more of that. I also would tie that a little bit to, since we're futurists here, right? We're talking about the future. If you look outside of our system, outside of a lot of the, you know, traditional institutions of higher ed, you look, you know, you can look at industry, you can look at some other areas. There's a lot of movement around, you know, you could say unbundling or disaggregating content so that students or folks in the workforce have access to smaller bits of smaller opportunities for learning that kind of goes along that flexibility path. I don't know what that looks like for us, because I know we have some pretty comprehensive curriculum design processes and whatnot, but we do have students that come to us with skills. We could do a better job, I think, of finding ways institutionally to measure those skills and perhaps deliver courses that fill those gaps for students. So I thought that was important. And then the last thing I'll say, because I'm sure the other panelists want to get in here, is, you know, there's been a lot of interesting conversation about synchronous online courses since the you know, the COVID crush, right? The big migration for all of us to online. And, you know, I hear a smattering of different viewpoints out there. You know, some folks who think we should never make students sit there, and there are a lot of real reasons not to do that. Bandwidth reasons, equipment reasons, pedagogical reasons. But there are also some times where that sense of community that you get in an environment where it is two-way live can be helpful. So it would be interesting to study some of the outcomes and learn more as we go through this and really help inform what the future looks like. Is it all asynchronous? Is it a mix? You know, where does the pendulum swing? It'd be fascinating.
Thanks, Jory. So you guys are a tough group to follow. So many great things have already been said, and I'm looking at my notes and trying to figure out what I can say to add to and not repeat. And I think one other thing to consider, faculty's role especially, is to remain open-minded and, you know, to go back to Suzanne and the flexibility piece, just open-minded to new ideas and really looking at the student-centeredness of those new ideas. How do they potentially impact student through the instruction that we provide or facilitate a little bit before we consider how do they impact us and the role we play. And so with that, then with new methodology and progressive methodologies, as Candace said so well, I mean, the new becomes the standard, and then that eventually phases out as well. So, you know, continually being open-minded to those new possibilities, the new approaches, not just with technology, but through technology, the new ways, not even new, but just evolving through delivery of instruction and facilitation of instruction, as well as has already been brought up, through more of a reliance on authentic, relevant assessment, so that it's real world based, it is an application of skills and knowledge based, and we move away from some of the rote activities that we do to check in with students to make their work more meaningful. And wherever we can integrate technology in a way that's meaningful and facilitates that for students and doesn't provide an additional barrier, then I think we progress. We need to progress. We have that responsibility. Ultimately, the progressive methodologies, you know, we see OER is becoming more and more mainstream and accepted, as it should be. And we have a responsibility to explore those things because they do impact our students' experiences and they do impact the equity of our students and their success. And so where we can, as faculty, evolve, adapt, what we do in order to benefit students and increase their ability to access the instruction we facilitate, as well as ultimately the ability to succeed with the instruction that we facilitate. We have that responsibility. I saw the question just quickly pop up about what's OER, open educational resources. So moving away from publisher provided texts, which really create a cost barrier for so many of our students who traditionally have tried to tackle instruction without the requisite textbook when costs are a barrier, to open license text so that we can either take them as they are or adapt them depending on the open licensing. And in most cases, unless we opt for a print option, they are free to students, and those materials can be embedded completely throughout a course. So the text is no longer this, requisite ancillary. It really is an integrated, embedded element of a course along with the instruction that we provide and facilitate. So, looking at OER, looking at authentic assessment, continuing to evolve the universal design for learning, I think really taking into account, an equity approach to what do each of our students need, and how can I as a faculty member, and how can we as faculty members, meet their individual needs and launch them into what's next for themselves.
That was great. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to share some of the questions that have been popping up from the audience. So let me see if I can sort through these. All right. The first one I see: how can we help some faculty understand that Zoom fatigue is real and that they should not teach their classes fully synchronously online? Are there recommendations or research we can point to? It is a free-for-all. Don't be shy.
I mean, I think that we can use all of ourselves as perfect examples in this situation. All of us get Zoom fatigue. So to expect our students to not understand, to not get it, would be unrealistic. So I would say the first thing to do is really talking about how are we feeling by the end of the day when you've been on Zoom all day long and doing that. I mean, most of us, I don't usually wear glasses all the time, and now I have to because everything's on a small computer. And so I think that really bringing it into their own experience and how they're feeling and relating it to their students is vital. As Jory mentioned, all of us are, kind of working from home too. And, Carlos is a perfect example as your child walking in right when you're about to talk. I have videos, my intro videos to my students where the kids are in it. And I'm like, I think it's, instead of hiding it and acting like it's not there, embracing it. I say to my students, right now, before my son left, I was doing all of my lectures in the garage, and I'm like, here's my garage, everyone. This is where I'm working. And I do think it's just, talk about what our own experience is. Zoom fatigue is definitely real. I mean, I don't know of a peer-reviewed journal article on it, but I mean, there's definitely been I think that Times even did an article on it, the Wall Street Journal. I mean, there's a lot of, in mainstream media, a lot of literature about how Zoom fatigue is definitely real and that we are living. New York Times, someone just posted, thank you. So definitely just bringing it to our own experience and realizing from a student perspective, if they're taking 5 classes, what it would be like for them.
I think to piggyback on that, there can be benefits to live synchronous online education, but do we need to provide instruction only through that means? Or can we blend the best of, moments of online synchronous with online asynchronous that gives students the time to really think through some of their responses in discussion posts or assignments and capture the material on their own time. As was pointed out earlier, from the student perspective, the need to be flexible. Asynchronous provides that to us, but the asynchronous, as Jory mentioned, really does have the opportunity to provide a little bit more of that engagement. And so perhaps, blended or hybrid approaches so that we spend a little bit less time in front of Zoom and a little bit more time engaging in other ways. It really is part of that transition away from that fully face-to-face on ground that we're so used to in so many cases, further into distance ed, really try to integrate the best of both.
I saw a question too that someone posted about, is anyone doing research on success rates and retention rates in synchronous versus asynchronous courses? And I will give a general answer, which is I'm sure they are or they will, but I know that when we've looked, for example, at success rates, I mean, we continuously, you know, every year at least, take a look at statewide online success rates, you know, kind of disaggregate that a little bit as well. You know, and we've been on average closing that gap. But one of the concerns we've had is, you know, with this huge trajectory point change, right, in March of this year when everyone went virtual, how do we keep our data, like how do we track things now, right? Because we had a different sample size. Now you have everyone online for a period of time. So I know that statewide we will be looking at that in terms of impacts of synchronous, asynchronous. You know, we're kind of still getting through the actual delivery of a lot of those courses at this point in time. But it's also, I think, very interesting to think about the impacts for students. And synchronous, by the way, you know, here we are on a Zoom webinar, and Zoom fatigue is so real. In fact, this morning we were starting, starting a long meeting this morning, and several of us, just kind of before it started, we're talking about all of our aches and pains, right? It's like 3 of us are like seeing the chiropractor every week now because we're sitting so much. And, you know, some folks weren't wearing shoes during the day. I mean, just all these things that have changed. So there's the Zoom fatigue piece of it that can be part of synchronous, but also, I'm gonna tie in one other thread here. Someone a couple of weeks ago, I saw this, someone said it, I wish I could remember who it was because I would credit them with it. But, you know, a lot of our students do not have computers, right? And you can look at data about student technology access and internet access. And a lot of our more disadvantaged, economically disadvantaged students use phones to access the internet. And the phrase that was used was courses designed for mobile devices or for phones is anti-racist, right? And I thought that was a really powerful statement because sometimes the choices we make when we're designing a course, and I've seen some of the chat as well about, you know, it takes a lot of time, a lot of focus and energy and resources to create a well-designed course. But we have to be designing with those things in mind, right? With our students' access level, technologically, bandwidth, device, all those things in mind as well. And so I think that becomes more of an issue with synchronous content, just because in the moment, you know, if that connection breaks, students feel stuck. I'll stop there, let somebody else in.
I'm happy to answer because someone asked me, I wanted to just respond, and it's so hard to type fast, about, like, especially for nursing, allied health, and EMT programs, in terms of what can you do besides proctored in terms of the bandwidth. And I'm going to be honest, I actually did not realize how much bandwidth it took for a proctored exam until my mom we have a special encore program at our college. So that's for our older students. My mom takes a bunch of classes, so I have her login. So I had her login and pretend, and I took a quiz as my mom. And that's when I realized how much bandwidth it sucks from your computer to actually take a proctored exam. And I was like, whoa, this is really asking a lot of our students. It took me 15 minutes just to log into the exam. And I have pretty good bandwidth, and I'm very lucky. I live in an area that has good bandwidth. And so that was when I actually realized to stop using it for this. For some of my instructors that are in very strict areas like nursing and EMT, and they need to have it proctored, what they have found works for them is they've been using Zoom, where the students are all logged in at Zoom and taking the exam on Zoom, where the instructor can see them taking it. Can there still be cheating going on? You know, yes, we could. Someone's like, what if someone has something hidden and they're talking to someone in India? I think we have to give our students the benefit of the doubt. There's always going to be those few that are going to take advantage, but Zoom, you can still watch them, and it doesn't suck the same bandwidth as a proctored program. I think this is still an issue that we're all trying to solve, and there are specific areas that we're not going to be able to say you absolutely cannot proctor, because they do with the nursing exams and the EMT things. They are specific to that area, but you know, be aware for those of us in other fields where we don't have to have it's not a life and death situation. We don't have to necessarily test them the same way.
And if I could just add one more piece, Wendy, because I think you brought up the really important point of, you know, gaming the system, right? So yes, you can game the Zoom, but you can game Proctorio pretty easily as well. And I think that's something that folks tend to forget. especially if you're affluent enough to have multiple devices, right? So it locks down this screen, but I have my other two screens, and there are ways. So just something to be aware of. It's not a perfect solution if we're looking at just cheating in addition to the other issues.
This is awesome. There's so many questions I can't keep track. Let me see. For this one, is there any thing that you all have noticed that's working best to provide faculty with kind of a growth mindset who tend to be tech reluctant? Yes, no, maybe so.
So,
Well, okay, sorry, go ahead.
no, so in terms of faculty who are tech reluctant, I think this experience has really opened the eyes of VPs, deans, campus presidents, and even some of our distance education colleagues. I think this has been really an eye-opening experience. We had to, before we went fully online, like within days, teach people an enormous amount about technology. We had to teach someone how to use a mouse for the first time, for instance. Copy and paste, right? These are the skills we take for granted. And I think this has been eye-opening in terms of just how many faculty do not have those skills. So I'm hoping that that's another one of the silver linings, that we explore this faculty use of academic technology capital and develop it.
You know, we talk a lot about digital literacy, and I think that that actually needs to be a component not only for our students, but also our faculty. This is kind of the way of the world right now, and we are expected to understand a little bit about technology. And as Candace just said, it's like, this isn't going to go away right now. It's going to continue. And our students, I think, are, now that they've had a taste of having like their syllabi on Canvas, and not necessarily the entire class, but I think that they appreciate having resources available to them 24/7. And I have a feeling even when we're all back in person, they're going to expect faculty to still offer resources in terms of web enhancing.
The other thing I would just add to just quickly answer that question is, I think for folks who are tech reluctant, I think that was the term that was used, particularly when you're in a situation like we're in now with the pandemic. Sometimes less is more. You know, there's nothing wrong with simple. You know, layering in new technologies, particularly if you're not comfortable with them as a faculty member. You can introduce a variable that you and your students don't want to have to deal with, right? So I think what's really nice, and thank you, I think it was Wendy who earlier said, you know, everyone has Canvas, right? We have that as a foundation. If you're new to using technology to teach, you can do most or all of what you need to do to effectively teach a class in that platform. And yes, there's a lot to learn in there if you're not familiar with it, but I think those who've been teaching online for a while and have integrated different kinds of resources into their Canvas courses, you know, be encouraged, be motivated by them, but know that it's okay to start simple, because if you're able to manage the technology in your course, that means you're able to help your students when they have problems with technology in the course as well. So I just kind of offer that as a perspective as well.
All right, so with that, I'm gonna move on to the next one, and we'll try to loop back to the questions that have yet to be answered, so hopefully we'll have some time for that. But I do want to move on to the next one so we can kind of keep on schedule here. To the panelists, what is the role of faculty in shaping distance education? What can faculty do? Why are they important in the process?
I'll go ahead and start on this one. The role of faculty in shaping distance education is, similar to the last question, remaining open-minded, being flexible, providing the stability throughout, but and then playing the role where we support each other, not just our students. We obviously all will not be early adopters, and that's perfectly fine. But as we look at implementing and integrating distance education into what we do, Wendy used the term web enhanced earlier, for those that are less familiar with it, meaning that we take a traditional on-ground course that doesn't meet any less on ground when we're able to do that again. And we enhance by providing additional materials and opportunities to interact within a shell like Canvas or some other technology. So, continuing to integrate distance ed, it wasn't that long ago that web enhancement was, kind of a new thing or less common thing amongst our faculty. And yet now, I guarantee coming out of this, all of us will find a way to web enhance the information that we use in our classroom, even when we are fully back on ground. And so looking to integrate, continue to integrate so that instruction as we all went through our educational years doesn't look the same anymore. It really shouldn't. The technologies are different. The student needs are different. The information to interact with is different. And so, looking at DE, we need to shape it as well as being shaped by it as we look at providing the best possible instructional opportunities that we can for our students. And again, we need to keep in mind access. So we already have had some conversations about what does it mean when students don't have bandwidth? We take for granted for that in many cases, and we have to really stay aware of that. It's as simple as, it can be as simple as figuring out that PDFs might work better in some bandwidth areas than Word docs within an online shell, or vice versa. It really depends. As a rural instructor, I find it's really tough to get attachments. So it's even better to just make everything a Canvas page because it takes less to download in that sense, or to view even, I should say load. And so, keeping those things in mind, to adapting to ensure that our students have access, no matter where they are, what they're doing, what they're accessing on, and then that they can continue to progress through a class and have assessments that are challenging, but actually have relevance and aren't just rote in the sense of, memorize this and kick it back to me in a multiple choice. Those can be easy to set up, but they're not necessarily alone the best way to assess student progress and ability to do the things that are being taught within a course. One more thing specific to DE is we need to help students adapt and evolve. And sometimes that means integrating a little bit at a time when it's possible. Obviously, this spring was a complete anomaly because for all of us, we had to adapt and evolve immediately. Although starting simple has been suggested helps for us and our students. But we need to continue to adapt and evolve, integrate slowly so that our students can integrate with us. If we introduce too much brand new stuff at once, we stop giving them that chance for access, and we confuse them and move them on. What's our role as faculty? I just said adapt and evolve and continue to work with each other as well as with our students. I think we can't overlook how important it is to hear what our students have to say about their experiences, using our technologies, integrating with our adapting and evolving instructional methods, and continue to respond to that, and then work with each other. I think sometimes we overlook that for those that we've already used technology resistant, some of our students or faculty rather, are not as comfortable with technology. And so how can we, as peers, bring them along and certainly work really hard to make each other feel supported rather than discouraged. When we start using a deficit mindset, when we speak to about our peers, just as with students, it's discouraging, it can be disrespectful. And so whatever we can do to help not just ourselves and our students to evolve, but to help our peers, I think that's a critical element that is easy to overlook.
Well, that's a tough one to follow, Cheryl. I think you kind of just answered it so well. It's very hard to add anything. I do want to just mention, when you mentioned Canvas pages, one of the best things to do to make sure that your class is ADA compliant is use Canvas pages, because when you're typing it directly into Canvas, it works really well with screen readers and everything. So something to remember, a lot of our students, or not a lot of, many of our students may have disabilities. And so we need to make sure that everything we're putting up is also ADA compliant. And that's also been really hard for a lot of our face-to-face faculty in terms of going fully online, is making sure that we're taking care of our students with disabilities. We've never had to put personal assistants into an online class before, and that came up this semester with DSPS, that's our Students with Disabilities program. Some of our students actually have personal assistants that would go to classes with them. So we had to figure out a way to have them labeled as special DSPS roles, but not actually be like tutors in the class or not be able to interact with other students. So we had to create a new permission within Canvas for that. So just making sure that we're also taking care of all of our students. What else can the faculty do? We do something where we're trying to mentor other faculty. Faculty who are a little more experienced can help faculty that are less experienced. What we were very fortunate. Our district gave us a 1.0 position to support DE during this semester, and we're hoping it'll be extended into spring. And one of the things that my campus did is we hired 5 people from different disciplines so that they are now DE support specialists. So we hired someone from chemistry, we hired someone from music, we hired someone from CTE, we hired another science person, and the last one, I'm trying to remember, oh, librarian, a technology librarian, so that we are now able to offer support for faculty with specific backgrounds in that area. Because even as a DE coordinator, I'm not that familiar with sciences. I admit I'm a psychology major, so background. So when they're asking me like, how do I create this test? How do I do this? I can support them with some of the tools, but having someone that has more expertise in their area already teaching online really makes a difference. So setting up groups and setting up discipline groups even, we created shells for every discipline on our campus so they can coordinate with each other. They can upload material into the shells to share with each other so they can pull it out for each of their classes. Really working with faculty to support each other is crucial during this time.
So in terms of the role of faculty in shaping distance education, I want to look at this from a systemic perspective. I see faculty as really critical to digging down into the rabbit hole of some of the innovations that are coming down the line, some of the policy changes that are coming down the line, and really helping to move institutions and moving the whole system actually toward a future that actually is more beneficial to our students. Otherwise, what happens, as most of us know, is that we get folks making decisions about distance education who aren't practitioners or who are not deep in the trenches of doing this work on a daily basis. And some changes coming up at the federal level, like competency-based education, these changes are coming down the line and they're going to impact us as for-profit colleges work around us and they do their job in trying to gain students and trying to serve students. We must also, as faculty, really keep our finger on the pulse of these changes. And I think DE coordinators are at the center of this in terms of regulations and our job monitoring those things. So I think it's our job really to look at how technology mediates education in that environment. And it does mediate everything from onboarding to lifelong learning. And we really need to be at the forefront of making sure the institutions are serving our students the best that can be done.
Yeah, so I think all great answers so far, and I'm going to kind of layer on top of what was already said. So the two main roles of faculty, I think, are, obviously to work with students and really listen to our students, right? We're in there with them and find out what they need, what's working, what's not working, because this is new and different for a lot of them as for a lot of us. And so finding out from them what they need and finding solutions to that, because nobody else can do that. We're in the trenches, as folks said. And I think that the second thing is really to collaborate with each other, because we're all learning together right now. Well, we're all learning separately right now because we're figuring out what to do in our class, but we need to start learning together and work together. I know there's some great questions in here about authentic assessment in nursing and in other disciplines. And as Wendy said, we need to get people that are in those disciplines having those conversations together. I know when we first went remote, the Academic Senate did some really great discipline convening discussion type stuff where we were just sitting around going, okay, what do we do? And we need to do those again, but in the hindsight, what did we do, what worked, and kind of work together. So just bringing folks from the same disciplines together, I think, can be really powerful.
Great conversation. I want to build on what Suzanne was just saying too. One of the things that we've done through CVC-OEI is to begin to put together, and we can put some information on this in the chat, some communities of practice for faculty. So for example, when we talk about, and I saw a few questions about this earlier, how do I teach math online? How do I'm teaching a lab science, I need ideas from others. We also have, I think we have one around oral communication online as well. So part of it is connecting with others who are traveling on the same path, or maybe are a little ahead of you on the path, learning from one another, and just to be really practical about it, not reinventing the wheel when you don't need to, right? I mean, I think that's a really big takeaway. And so, like I said, I'll share a little bit of that in the chat as well. But also, just recognizing that, faculty, part of your role is to incubate, new ideas and new ways of teaching, do new things that you can try. Ethically, we don't experiment on our students, but we do try new things once in a while, right? In our classes, and so learning that and sharing that and being connected to others. I also just think students need diverse choices, and they need diverse learning experiences. And so, really recognizing that. And I think, Candace, you mentioned pandemic pedagogy earlier, which is just, that's so slick, right? In terms of like something to just encapsulate so many of the issues I think that we're all dealing with. But we need faculty involved to move from pandemic pedagogy to more inclusive, effective, engaging learning experiences. And all these things we're talking about, whether it's, humanizing, authenticity, flexibility, moving forward, I think that those are the kinds of elements that students are going to expect, especially now, since so many of these students are doing this in their K-12 experience, right? We haven't had that at this anywhere near this level before. But when you get your first batch of high schoolers from, this year who come in, how's that going to be different? So we're all learning, we're all trying new things, but definitely the faculty voice is incredibly important. And I would just also, shameless plug, but point you to the @ONE website and the CVC website, where there are a lot of guides, there are a lot of, we have courses and other resources, but that is a system-wide resource that's available to you. And I'll put that, I've got a list of things to put in the chat now, but I'll put that in the chat for you as well.
All right, I'm trying to sort out these questions because there's a little bit of comment in it. So some colleges have been waiting for distance education guidelines to come out. Is there an anticipated time when those will be released? I see Wendy laughing. I think she wants to answer.
Oh, I was looking at Jory.
I think somebody who's on DTAC should answer that.
Is anybody here on DTAC? Oh, Candace, good.
Go Candace.
I just joined DTAC, so let me give you the best answer that I can think of here.
Candace, and let me interrupt you real quick. Can you give us the full name of it?
Of DTAC?
Yeah. Distance Ed TAC?
It's the Distance Educational Technologies Advisory Committee at the Chancellor's Office. And it is a multi-representational group. So there's distance ed coordinators there, there's faculty representation, there's president, CEO representation, there's chief instructional officer representation, and I believe there's even chief information officer, or our IT folks are on there as well.
Yes, thank you. What she said. So I've just joined that group, but I can tell you, I know a little bit about the history of the guidelines. So the guidelines have been created with one context, and the Chancellor's Office had some shifts in responsibilities. And so what happened was those guidelines were looked at one last time, and it was decided that they needed to be separated out to clarify what is recommended, what campuses should do versus what they must do. And so trust that the delay in getting those guidelines out is in the best interest of campuses in clarifying exactly what is recommended versus what is required. That's my understanding of the delay. They're just making sure that all the T's are crossed and all the I's are dotted. So we should be seeing those in some form soon. Sorry, I don't have more information than that.
That's quite all right. Let's go with this next one. What do you say to people, community members who are upset that more attention is being paid to race than to education?
Go ahead, Suzanne.
I think you can, yeah, I don't know that I have it fully formed, but I think you can't separate them. It's kind of the whole reason that this focus is so important. If we're not educating certain groups because we are disenfranchising them, then education isn't working. And so they're not separate. It's just we're trying to figure out how to get education to work better is why that is an important focus.
I was going to say, for some, it may feel like the focus is on race, but I think ultimately, as Suzanne just said, it's on education. It's just a matter of needing to look more closely at the impact of race on education and educational outcomes. And the data is really clear that some of our student groups, people of color, are not as successful in our system as it's built now as traditionally white students. And so, needing to pay attention to that so that all of our students can succeed at much higher rates, and we can close some of those achievement gaps that are pretty vast between some races. We have a responsibility to take care of that.
One of the things we've done is add to all of our instructor training for distance education an equity model. And so we are embedding it as part of teaching online and being aware of what our students are going through and equity issues that our students may have. I mean, when we look at any new softwares now, the first question we ask is, will this work on a cell phone? Because we do know that so many of our students don't have access to computers. Even though we're trying to give out Chromebooks, they still have to access a computer to request the Chromebook. So it's really a lot of it is we're trying to make it part of our, just embedding it in part of our education for our instructors.
Thank you for that. Someone asked, could someone discuss a little more the peer review on Canvas? How do you use this? What do you think is helpful about this feature?
So I had mentioned it in the chat when I was answering your question in terms of student-to-student contact with each other. I love the peer review feature in Canvas. You can set it up where it just automatically assigns a student another student's assignment to grade. And what it basically is students giving feedback on other students' assignments. And it's about constructive feedback. And one of the things I found is students are actually harder graders than instructors are. And I love, my students normally would do a observation where they visit a childcare center. Right now we're doing a virtual observation because obviously no one's going to childcare centers. And so I assign them to kind of read each other's observations and give feedback on what they saw in terms of the development of the child. And maybe in observations, it's about not being judgmental. It's about really being able to talk about a child's development without making conclusions. So it's really, it's great opportunity for students to read other students' work and give comments on it. And it really works beautifully in Canvas. It sets it up and encourages students to work together in that they're giving each other feedback. And that actually is part of the requirements now, student-to-student engagement. So the peer review, my art teachers love it because students upload like their art projects and they get feedback, as well as my photography instructors use it a lot. And I'm trying to think, even my communication instructors are using it when students upload their speeches.
All right, so that one was there. This was asked a couple minutes ago, but can you share the equity model you are using? So I'm not sure if it was related to someone that was speaking right there at that time, but that was the question asked.
Can I take it? I'm just going to start off the answers here. This is not a definitive answer by any stretch of the imagination, but I want to say that there are many equity models and equity theories. And I think what's most important is the attention to the fact that there is systemic racism and that people are disadvantaged by the system. Whether that was done intentionally 300 years ago and what that looks like today, I mean, that really isn't, I think, as important as us looking as a whole at who is disadvantaged by the system that we're currently using, how are they disadvantaged, and then how to actually fix that. There are many different approaches to that, and I want to start the answers with that.
Gonna bounce the ball around? No, we're good. Okay.
Well, let me also mention a couple of things. There's the Peralta equity rubric. I mean, there are different methods that people are using to address this. We use humanizing in the online environment. There are wonderful classes available, especially through @ONE, for humanizing the online class. Those are all methods of trying to quantify in some way, shape, or form what really isn't quantifiable, and that is how people are disadvantaged by the online system as it is now. And I think in my own research, I see students struggle with not only accessing their classes, but I see them struggle with finding a great space to study. You know, they might need a place to go on campus, just a quiet place. Maybe they have a laptop, but they bring it to the library because they need a quiet space in their lives. And I think we need to think about every possible manifestation of student issue as they share it with us, right? We need to be open, we need to ask them, and we need to look at ways that we can adjust to help them learn the materials. It's not about students spending time learning a new piece of technology. It's really about them learning the subject matter. And we need to spend, I think, more time on the subject matter and less time fixing problems with technology. If only we could do that, I think that would be a really significant way of increasing equity.
All right. The question that's still open in the Q&A is a little more of a comment than a question. So if nobody has anything else to add on that particular kind of section of it, we'll move on to the next one. Yes, we're good. Okay, so for the next question, the next prepared question, what is the faculty role in preparing our students for their distance education technology related futures? Whether that means lifelong learning, in a world that's largely mediated by technology, transferring and additional education, careers, etc. Let's hear it.
I'll take a stab at that one, and then I'm sure folks will have a lot to add to it. You know, I think when we talk about preparing students for the future, I mean, our society is so knowledge-based now that having the skills to be able to navigate that and really to recognize that students and us, we will be lifelong learners, right? In this kind of a setting. I read a statistic recently that was really pretty interesting to me. I'm going to look at it here so I don't get it wrong. But, you know, from 2003 to 2016, the number of academic papers published worldwide doubled, right? From 2003 to 2016. It doubled again from 2016 to 2020. So the idea that we can fit all of the content in, fit all of the knowledge into these compressed timeframes that we have, you know, you have your students for a term, right? Whether it's semester, quarter, whatever way your course is organized and whatever timeline it's on. It's so important that students have those information competency skills, that they are savvy and informed about how to navigate the different ways to access knowledge and information and really apply it. And so those might be skills like critical thinking, independent learning. Again, I mentioned before, you know, there's a diversity of experiences in learning, which I think we'd all say really benefits our students. So it's maybe less about knowledge acquisition and more about how to know when you need to acquire knowledge, how to acquire knowledge, right? Where to acquire it from, and then how to apply that to your life, to the problem you're trying to solve. So it just seems that we're in a continuous state of learning as our world has evolved around us. And I'll pause there and let somebody else answer the question.
I think I'm next. So similar to what Jory is saying, I think that as faculty, our role in preparing our students is to be critical thinkers. You know, I think none of our goal is to have students learn how to memorize. We've all been through that. All of us have had that class which you like stayed up the night before, memorized it, and then, you know, got whatever grade you got on the exam and then never remembered that information again. Our goal is to have our students really critically learn material and how to even search for material. Like I'd say one of my big assignments for my students is actually finding a peer-reviewed journal article and compare it with a pop magazine article to see the difference in how the material is shared with people. Because in child development especially, you know, there's like, hey, you can get your child reading by 1. And so I'll have students that are like, hey, wow, look at this great article. And I'm like, no, that's against everything. So it's not about memorizing material, but it's how to critically look at material and know what is fact-based and what is like kind of sensational based, and how to like share that with even information. If my students are going to go on to be teachers, how are they going to teach their students, and how are they going to share information with their with the parents in their classrooms? So I'd say a big part of our job isn't to, specifically for me and a lot of my colleagues, what we're emphasizing so much is that's why we focus so much on authentic assessment. And I am not going to group everyone together because I know there are specialized areas which have to do with passing board exams and everything, and that are life and death. So I don't want to in any way say that, but for many of our other fields, these are not life and death situations. Let's teach our students how to move forward and find accurate information that will be at their fingertips. So memorization is not the kind of the wave of the future. They won't need to.
Yeah, and Wendy, I think I'm going to dovetail onto what you said almost verbatim, because I teach human biology in the pop culture that students bring me, you know, cure this way, you know, 10 tricks doctors don't want you to know. And so that I think is the most important thing that we need to give our students, is the ability to figure out what information is good information. How do you do fact checking, right? That basic information literacy for a lot of our fields is so core. As we're moving away from, you know, the memorize the information, because now you have all the information in your pocket, like it's all there, but you just have to sift through the bad information to get to the good. And I think just related to how we design our courses, that's one more reason to move to something like OER, away from the traditional textbooks. Because I think a lot of our education in the past has been kind of a textbook-based pedagogy, right? Like we teach what the book says because it's this tome of knowledge, and that is where knowledge is housed. And this is just a very different world from where we went to school. And so really focusing on where do you find that information is going to be key moving forward for students.
So I'm gonna go at this question a little sideways, and this may be a controversial answer, but I'm going to say it anyway. I really believe that our pathways efforts in our system have really been just a big simplification project. Really, we have, as soon as we could put things on the internet, we did, and boy did we, right? We put the catalog on the internet, our college catalogs on the internet, and then we broke it up into pieces and we put it all over the place. It was like an Easter egg hunt, right? So we just started throwing things out there on the internet. The more we could put out there, the better, right? That was 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 30 years ago. And we haven't really had a systemic way of looking at how this information is presented in this digital environment. And this dizzying array of options that students have for their learning paths, I think, is what prompted the Pathways project, the simplification, what I call the simplification project. So, and I would argue we wouldn't need that if our digital strategies had been mindful. But who knew, right? Who knew what was coming? Who knew how big it would expand exponentially? We need options that are easily navigable, and we see this happening on a lot of our campuses now with CCC Apply. Websites are getting easier to navigate. Bakersfield College was one of the first to really do a really excellent job at systematically simplifying and clarifying what it is that they were offering. And I think Now our roles as faculty is to really see that bigger picture and to help students navigate that. You've all touched on this, but I think our role as faculty is to help students see through the clutter and help them figure out tools of surviving in the clutter. And somebody touched on this irony a while ago, we have a crisis of access. Debbie mentioned that in the beginning. We tell students in our learning objectives, we're going to teach you how to navigate some of these technologies. We're going to teach you how to do that, right? We're going to teach you some of these digital skills. Yet to even apply at the institution, they have to have those skills to be able to take care of the enrollment process, right? So it's required in onboarding. So I think that we as faculty need to help mature the discipline in the way that it handles technological complexity and technological complications. And I would argue less is more, and I would argue that we really do need to simplify what it is that we're doing for the sake of having students be able to focus on the materials, on the subject matter. And I think that's our primary role, is helping these students navigate this and yet simplifying the system at the same time.
Once again, you've all said such fantastic things, and so many notes I have. I will absolutely echo that critical thinking and the ability to search and find information and then discriminate amongst the information that's found, I think is critical in terms of us, the role we play as faculty and preparing our students for lifelong learning. I think the other piece Candace started to touch on, and it's really more specific to the use of technology. And the students who we assume are tech savvy coming in now, we find they don't necessarily have the academic tech skills that they need. And so we play a role in shaping those as we go. But they in 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years will be us, the older adults who have a harder time adapting to new technologies. But that's going to speed up much more faster than we've experienced in our lifetime. And so I think preparing them to encounter a new technology, problem solve a new technology, and adapt and become proficient in it will be a part of what we do as faculty. And as we integrate new technologies into our classroom, less is more overall, but the more we can help students see that process of adapting and learning and then utilizing that in the learning experience will be a process that they'll continue to adapt and evolve throughout their lifetime, because they will need to adapt to new technologies as they operate, as well as they, become lifelong learners.
All right, so then we're going to go to the Q&A. Now, the one I've been looking at for a while, it was posted first, but it's still in the future when you look at the Q&A, which is really strange. But so I'm going to try to ask this one. It has to do with kind of post-COVID requirements. And so really, it's kind of asking more or less, is there any sort of movement that would require some sort of statewide regulations to mandate faculty training? Are you guys aware of any movements sort of that might come about that way? Does it look like we're moving towards some sort of state mandated trainings?
So let me start this off. So Title V, which is the state of California's interpretation of the Ed Code, the actual law itself, says that faculty should have training if they're going to teach in the online environment. I will look up the link for that and turn it over to my colleagues.
So Title, Candace is actually right. And Candace, I think it's 55204. It does say that, but it is absolutely vague and doesn't speak to the type of training, the amount of training. And so that all falls within the 10+1, the Senate's academic and professional matters. And so all of our local campuses, the faculty senates have had those conversations at some point in the past and established some degree of training or preparation that's required. Some of the challenges I think we saw during the COVID transition was how different those requirements are from college to college, anywhere from an interest and an ability to at least access an online class and then develop it to, 30, 50, 60 hours of very specific course instruction and finishing certificates. And so that's a huge variation. And while I haven't heard of an effort to specifically, mandate any particular amount of training or a type of training. For right now, that remains local. But I do say, I think it's important that faculty who are teaching online are trained, but I don't think we should be treating online instruction differently. in the sense that we don't require that our faculty walking into a classroom are trained on pedagogy. We simply need to be experts in a discipline. And so I think there's room for a larger discussion about how are we both expecting and preparing our faculty discipline experts to teach in any and every environment. And so, if we can talk about best practices and becoming trained in those best practices for facilitating online instruction, let's also talk about best practices and facilitating those practices within an on-ground classroom, or for some of our faculty in our campuses in a correspondence environment that poses its own difficulties. And so I think it's a broader conversation, honestly, than just online.
I would just add to that too, particularly specific to the Title V provision around the requirement for some preparation to teach online. I think the local interpretation, that's sort of what it's left to often, is what is the local interpretation of that. And from a statewide perspective with CVC, we see lots of variability, right, between institutions. And I think having things like the course design rubric, having the intro to online teaching and learning courses and other things available throughout one has helped. I'll put a link in the chat as well, just if you're interested in having this conversation on your campus. We did come out with what we call the benchmarks for high quality inclusive online learning, which really breaks it into like, what does foundational, it's from an institutional perspective, what does a foundational approach look like? Meaning you have some kind of preparation, there's some design support available, things like that. And then what are the growth benchmarks beyond that, right? How do you go from those foundational levels to more exemplary kind of status? So I agree. I think that's an area that it's tricky because, like Cheryl said, you don't want to have different standards, but we also, there's an interest in making sure that courses are high quality, right? So how do you reconcile those two? Is part of the challenge.
Hey, you want to click and it doesn't unmute me. All right, so this one is a little bit more about best practices, but the question is about how to introduce kind of resources that would broaden the spectrum of what students are learning inside, that will connect them with their futures. If anybody has some best practices to share about that.
I think leaning on students to find what they think is relevant is a good way to approach that. So that's another one of the aspects of UDL. So that's a good place to bring it in, is students know what's relevant to them. And I think we can let go of the need to be the ones that know what's relevant to students. Like that's not, I can't know what my students think is interesting and important. They know that. And we can lean on students. They will always pleasantly surprise us, I think, when we ask them to do these next level things, such as finding applications of our content to their futures. And I wanted to wrap in one other question too while I have Mike, about, there was a comment about assessing critical thinking is not an equitable practice. And I think this also answers that, right? Like allowing students how they want to demonstrate critical thinking, that is the equitable practice. It's not like we're asking them not to think critically, but giving them the space to think about what that means for them and how they can best demonstrate that. That's where the equitable approach comes in.
All right, in keeping with the kind of best practices, there is a question about how do we best encourage students to use important resources that are outside of the classroom that have now been moved online, such as a tutoring center.
One of the things we did is we added the tutors to the actual Canvas shell. So we have like maybe, I think we have close to 100 tutors, and we actually put them into every Canvas shell, as well as the fact that we have on a separate Canvas shell the net tutor that links to the student tutors that are local to our campus. And we also have embedded the the tutors all go through specific training before they're allowed to be added to the Canvas shell. So like how we even add them is that we had to create a form, and the faculty member submits who their tutor is, and then the tutoring director, our CAS director, actually logs in and okays them, and then we'll add them, because we want to make sure that our tutors know how to work with students and have gone through adequate training for them. And then the other thing is, a lot of faculty will give some extra credit for using these resources, or reminding them to use the resources, or having the tutor lead some of the discussions. So we actually, some of our tutors actually have office hours where every week they have open Zoom hours where students like log in and meet with a tutor that's live for them. And that's been actually going very well. And I mean, we were doing this before we went online. Now that obviously we're online, the students are really appreciating fellow students that are supporting them online.
I would just add to that, and I'm thinking back, Wendy, to 6 years ago when we started the online tutoring pilot with the OEI, and your school was one of our pilot colleges for that. And actually, I used to be department chair and connected to a tutoring center as well. I think so often the biggest challenge is getting students, kind of two things. One is demystifying the tutoring center. Like if a student can, even just making the decision to click that link to go into a virtual tutoring session can be intimidating to students. So finding ways to either, as faculty, you can help by, just recommending or having a practice assignment or something that just gets them into that space. First of all, just get them into the space and take some of the anxiety away. But also, for many students, there's a barrier around recognizing or believing that they would benefit from seeing a tutor, or that they need tutoring, right? And so that's another piece where I think faculty encouragement and anything that can get them exposure, so that maybe they don't need to see a tutor, or they don't think they need to see a tutor when they do that practice assignment. But then, 3 weeks later when they're stuck, they'll know where to go back to. They will have already, sort of demystified that experience. And I think that's really important.
I'll add that two things that we're doing at Sacramento City College are working pretty well, and that is we're having tutors be sort of a presence in Canvas courses. They are giving introductory cute little videos for students. They're sharing those with faculty who put that in their classes. What they're also doing is making sure that they walk students through the process first. So they don't just say, here, go here and get tutoring, but we do have some hand-holding for actually accessing tutoring. Our writing center has actually made tremendous headway. They've closed equity gaps in performance for students who actually seek out writing tutoring, even in the online modality, depending on the number of times that they get tutoring. They do a really good job of walking students through the process first before their first appointment. Lately, I've been hearing that tutors are acting almost as therapists, just listening to a lot of students complain about what's happening in their lives. And so they're doing a lot of resource brokering, and there's a lot of that, and that's having good impact on student success. So they may only talk about their assignment for 10 minutes, but that student may have been connected to a food pantry or to a counselor for mental health therapy. That the tutors are doing double duty, triple duty.
All right. This question is asking for some insight. If you all think that our forced move to DE has been hurting enrollments across, the community colleges.
I mean, I would say it's hurting enrollment everywhere. It's not just community college. I think the 4 years are also getting hit. I think a lot of students decided to take a gap year. I actually thought our enrollment would go up. I know for my district, it's gone down. The hard thing is to know, is it because we were online, or we also know that this year in particular, there were fewer students also graduating from high school in our area that would have been coming to us. So we're not sure whether it was because we went online completely or whether it was just the fewer students. We're about 92% enrollment. Some of our sister colleges are even lower. So we just opened 75 classes that start on Monday to try and, you know, increase our enrollment to get more and give more students that I actually know a bunch of, my son's a freshman, so I know a bunch of kids that left their freshman year colleges, came back home and are hoping to start community college like halfway through because it wasn't working well at the 4 years. But you know, I think this is, everyone has already said that this is an unprecedented time. Everyone has had to pivot. And I think for a lot of students, it's not the freshman year they were expecting. And for a lot of parents, you know, as a parent who had a kid going to college, looking at the price tag, private colleges, $85,000. You know, there is something to be said for our free community colleges. They're phenomenal. My kid is not at one of those, by the way. But there's something to be said for, you know, offering our students these great opportunities, smaller class sizes, full professors, you know, not TAs. And I'm only hearing positive things from most of our students about how their experiences are. That being said, there's definitely a lot of students that aren't having positive experiences either. But I would say for the most part, you know, majority of our faculty are working really hard and are doing the best they can to make this as an amazing semester as possible for our students. Even the ones that aren't as comfortable, most of them are sticking with synchronous lectures, but they are there. I had one who was so anti-technology and he bought a plexiglass and he took his canvas where you know how you can mirror it when you do the choose a virtual background, so that when he's writing on the plexiglass, it shows the students directly what he's writing. And I was like, he was like one of my most non-technology professors, and he figured that out. And I was so proud of him, and his students are doing well. So I really want to do a shout out for all of these professors that, you know, who had no knowledge of technology, have really gone about making it better. But as far as the research goes, I think we'll know more next semester looking back. But I do think enrollment's down for everyone.
I would like to steer this in just a little bit of a different direction. We're talking about the future of distance education. And I know that those of us that were at the consortium meeting today got an introduction, or not an introduction, but a reintroduction to the future of the cross-enrollment system and the future of distance education and the way that students are going to enroll in our system. And I want to ask Jory if he would be willing to share that few minutes of video walking us through it. Everybody okay with that?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Did you want me to share the actual video or a link to the video? What's your preference? And I'm happy to talk about it a little bit as well.
Sure. I think the video would be, it's only a few minutes, right?
Yeah, it's about 4 minutes.
Carlos, we have time for that? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So before while I pull that up here, just let you know, this is related to the course exchange, the student-centered exchange, which the CVC-OEI has been working on for some time with a number of districts. And so really the goal of cross-enrollment through the exchange is to ensure that students who do hit a roadblock in terms of course availability at their home college are able to, tap into really the network of other professional faculty in our system and institutions in our system to stay on the path, if you were to quote the guided pathways terminology there. So we relaunched the student-centered exchange actually last week. You can go and see it and play with it at cvc.edu. And I'm happy to go ahead and share that video here. And this is a video that I'm going to see if we can get the sound. If we can't, then I'll just talk us through it as we go forward. But I will have to be able to share the screen, and it looks like I can't do that.
I have the share screen button. You don't have the share screen button?
It just says it's been disabled by the host. So whoever's the host would have to give me some permission there.
Oh, it's because you're not a co-host with the rest of us, Jory. So now you should be.
Okay, now I got it. All right. I didn't have the power. Here we go. So let me go ahead and share this. One moment. Here we go. All right. So So this is the online course finder. You're not going to get the audio, so I'll do it. This is our online course finder. You can find it at cvc.edu, and this allows students to browse available online courses across the CCC system, searching by general ed requirements, for example, which could be CSU breadth or IGETC requirements, or by keyword, which is great. So the first thing that a student does is to indicate what their home college is, if they have one. If they don't, then there's a different workflow. So we'll choose Foothill in this case, and look through the different search parameters. And in this case, we're going to go ahead and type in keyword, looking for a biology class that will transfer back into Foothill College. So we do a little search here, and it brings up some results. And in this modern era, giving students the ability to filter, like we're talking about them being good consumers of information and using critical thinking, they can search for courses that are available for instant enrollment, courses that have available seats, and we're building out the network of colleges where we're able to, in real time, pull in available seat count. And they can search for courses that start after a certain date and before a certain date. Here's a course at American River we're going to click on for nutrition. We can all use I can use a little nutritional advice here during COVID. So I'm going to read through this course description. We're pulling in information about transferability, in-state and out-of-state fees, although these are only available to students inside California. And this looks like a schedule you'd be used to seeing. Here we have a class that has 9 seats available. And so we're going to click the Add Class button. And then the student will actually log in through their home college. So, your normal college login for a student, nothing new there. And it brings up the student consent form, where thanks to AB 637, which was passed about 2 years ago, students can actually now consent to the sharing of their information from their home college to a secondary teaching college in the system. And so they go through this consent and agree to have their transcript sent electronically back at the end of the course. And they just add a little bit of information. Some of it's pre-populated here, like the first and last name and the middle name, but they can update their home address. And also, I think in this case, the email was pre-populated, so they can update that as well if that's something that they want to do. And again, this is really an instant enrollment process as compared to going through a new full application in the CCC Apply system. So we're going to move forward, and for the purposes of calculating the student's tuition, whether they pay resident or non-resident tuition, even though they're living in California, we see a residency value there of yes. They just validate that, and then they're going to go ahead and click on the submit button here in just a second. So this is where we're actually processing the enrollment in real time. Says it can take up to 5 minutes, but it really doesn't. We just don't want the student to close the window. But the goal here is really to help a student in like one setting get enrolled in a class, get the class, have it added to their Canvas dashboard, and move forward. So that was real time, no editing, just enrolled in a nutrition class. Now the student has the ability to pay if they're going to pay through the normal credit card payment system, or to indicate a promise grant if they're having their tuition waived, and then also to indicate that they want to use their federal financial aid. And that's a huge benefit for students who are part of our colleges who are part of our consortium, is that students can actually count courses from both their home college and a teaching college through the exchange toward their financial aid award. So it's an important equity issue. We can also display the schedule to the student. They can see their courses, drop courses, and also set some notifications and some other favorite course searches, so that when that course comes up that is hard to find, gets added to a schedule, the student will get a text message or an email and be able to go in and pick that up. So that's that was the video. Hope I didn't talk too fast, just trying to make sure I didn't, following the video, so to speak. But really, I think in terms of the future, right? Our goal with CVC is to keep students at their home college, provide data back to your college about where those students, what are they looking for that you're not offering, right? Or where are you gaining students because someone else is not offering something. So I always say the best exchange is one that students don't need, but we know that sometimes students do need it. And so that's really what we're trying to do here. Also, in those search results you saw, we have weight on the badges for courses that have gone through a quality peer online course review process for quality review. Those rise to the top so that, again, students can make those kinds of choices, and we can showcase the incredible effort and work that has gone into improving those courses. So, is that what you wanted to see, Candace? Like pull the lever and I just can talk for 5 minutes about the exchange. There you go.
Thank you. Well, you know, it's critically important. It really is the future of distance ed in California in terms of what we're doing and what we're looking at. And I think since we have such a broad audience, I think it's really important that everybody see that.
Jory, and there's a follow-up question on that. An audience member wrote, I have 3 courses that have earned quality review badges. Can you explain how you have decided to list the courses? So in other words, if my courses were approved for badges last year, are they listed at the top of the list or the bottom underneath the course that received a badge more recently than mine? Or are they listed alphabetically, etc.?
Gotcha. Yeah, great question. I think I know the questioner there too from a previous life. So there is an algorithm that we use to display the results for a couple of reasons. One is we don't want students always getting exactly the same results, right? So just in terms of equity across institutions, that's one piece of it. But the first thing that happens is home college courses show first, right? So if that were, let's say, a Sacramento City College student, and there's a course available that matches their needs at Sacramento City College, we're going to pop that to the top of the list. And within those courses from that home college, the ones with the quality reviewed badge are going to come to the top of that. The second sort of section of that list then is going to be another set of criteria where non-home colleges, the quality reviewed courses pop to the top of the list. And really it depends on the parameters and what the student searched for in terms of, you know, if you have 3 courses that are approved, depending on the search, they may be listed in a different order, right? Because of the filtering and the other things that are there. But we have continued to refine that order to be very intentional so that where we can, we're keeping the student at their home institution because we all, I think, believe that that's their best chance, right? It's less friction for everybody. But then we're also creating opportunities if they are going to take a course through the exchange, they can see courses that have that quality badge or that have additional resources like tutoring, counseling support, student readiness built in as well.
All right, so then we'll get to one that that's been hanging out there for a while. So regarding, well, budgetary constraints, how can we work around those for distance education? Specifically, one main concern was, you know, part-time faculty, there's not enough resources there. What can you all speak to that?
I think first, just to agree that there aren't enough resources there. And so we have to be creative in how we set up trainings and really think of it as another form of instruction. Are we expecting our faculty, including our part-time faculty, to be available at a specific point in time in order to participate in some of the faculty development that we do, or professional development, especially around online education? Or are we providing asynchronous opportunities so that they can continue to learn and incorporate new ideas on their own time? That still isn't compensating for time, but it's at least recognizing that our part-time faculty in particular don't have the traditional workday that so many of us have. There are, many responsibilities and conflicts are likely. And so when we can consider providing professional development in a more asynchronous facilitated environment, I think that's an advantage first of all. The compensation element is a difficult one, and that's, you know, FAC certainly has been a advocate for part-time compensation, both, you know, within the classroom and office hours outside, and will continue to advocate, I'm sure, for professional development as well. And the Senate has played a role in some of that as well. It is important, but looking at the budget situation and what it is, we as faculty just collectively need to continue to speak up about how important it is that we evolve and continue to offer high quality instruction. The professional development is a critical element of that.
And I would like to argue also, make a plug for the what the CVC has done with @ONE, the online network of educators. That training is unbelievable. And the resources like the Pocket PD, there have been fabulous opportunities for faculty to learn so much. And I think that's really critical as well. And that's another way for faculty, since most of those folks in @ONE facilitating those are faculty. It's a great way for faculty to help shape and move the system.
I'm reading one of the questions in the chat, and it's asking about how to set up 2 computers so that I can best Zoom synchronously. So I'm not quite sure. I mean, I only have 1 computer. I Zoom synchronously. You don't have to have 2 computers for it. I mean, one of the things I like about Zoom is you can record it. There are some recommendations that if your students' faces are showing, you either have to get their consents if you want to use the same lecture next semester, or just try not to have any students showing and just have your page showing so that you could reuse it. One of the things we really work with our faculty on is trying to create generic enough lectures that you don't have to reinvent them every semester. So that a lot of faculty should hopefully already be ahead for the spring. My schools announced we're fully online in the spring. I don't know if all the other schools have done that yet. So really one of the things we're trying to do is help faculty with almost like cheat sheets. How can I make this a little more doable so that in the spring I'm not so overwhelmed and I can focus more on maybe more interactive, engaging activities and not so much my lectures because I did them all in the fall. And then a lot of us, I think, all got Canvas Studio for free through CCC. And so I have been loving Canvas Studio. One of the things I do is I'll just record all my videos in one day, and I have a bunch of shirts that I just run and change shirts. So my students don't know it's one day, and 1 minute I'm in a raid and the other time it's down. And so I just kind of, you know, maybe throw on earrings and don't. So they don't even know it's one day, but it's a great way to get a lot of videos created, and it does the closed captioning for you. You still want to watch it and fix it, but it is really, there are some really nice features that are free right now. Oh, not all districts are using, oh, sorry, that's Chromebook comment. So I would say that that's one of our big cheat sheets to our faculties. I'm generic enough in most of my lectures where I don't say, hey, everyone, today is Friday, October 23rd. I just say, hey, this is what we're going to talk about this week, so that you can reuse your lectures. And then we actually have, with a lot of our faculty mentors, they're sharing lectures with each other. Here, there's a faculty member that did a great lecture on, like I've shared my poor kids are guinea pigs because I teach child development, and like everyone has seen videos of them. In fact, my son's girlfriend is a psychology major, and she was looking at her textbook and she's like, oh my God, that's you. And my son doesn't even remember that we did a bunch of videos of him like learning conservation task. And they're in his video at his university, which he didn't take, but his girlfriend took. But I mean, so like, you know, sharing resources like that, sharing if your science faculty and one of you has figured out a way to do a really good lab and another person figures out a way to do the other lab, you just share that. I'd say a lot of us is that we all like to help each other, and really we should be fostering that, where not everyone has to reinvent everything.
If I could put in a quick plug, we talked about the communities of practice that @ONE is hosting for a handful of disciplines, but there was a question earlier about the Vision Resource Center and a faculty space. And there is a faculty space in the Vision Resource Center now, a community. It's been a little bit slow to take off, but you know, the more faculty have an interest in engaging with each other in there and perhaps sharing resources, if there's not a space in @ONE to do that, the more we all benefit. And so, if you don't have a colleague on your campus who you might share ideas with or bounce ideas off of, then take a look at the Vision Resource Center, and I'll put the link into the chat.
Cheryl, there was a question. You had mentioned the Title V regulation that kind of dictates the distance ed and how it's a little bit vague. So will that mean that we have a lot of courses that do not meet ADA requirements for the content on them, in them?
Hopefully not. Ultimately, we all have a responsibility, whatever amount of training our local college Senate and Senate have decided to require of us, we all have a responsibility to ensure that our materials are accessible. And that's whether we're teaching online or teaching on ground. And so, again, professional development, ideally faculty support, peer support, and just dedicating ourselves to making sure that the materials we're producing for our classes are available and accessible to all of our students. Yeah, we might have that concern, and some might feel like a 60-hour course at one college better prepares a faculty member than a 5-hour course at another. And it's really hard to say. And Jory brought it up earlier. I think having shared resources that @ONE has developed really helps to equalize a little bit, so that those colleges that, and I'll speak for smaller colleges, being at a smaller college, it can be difficult to have the resources to provide more in-depth training to many of our faculty. And so it's done on a much more one-on-one basis, but be able to point people towards shared system resources like @ONE and all of the trainings available there help us to lift our abilities of our faculty. And so, being able to share that regardless of the local agreements. Ultimately, though, I'll go back to, we all have a responsibility to make sure our materials are accessible. And part of that needs to be part of the course evaluation, as well as perhaps faculty evaluation processes.
I'm glad you brought that up. There comes @ONE again and their resources. It would really be, I think it would be great if the Accessibility Center were to partner with @ONE and offer a lot more in terms of accessibility and maybe a clearer path for faculty in terms of what they need to do. I know that they're looking at putting an accessibility math course online in the future. And so I think that partnership, I just sort of thought about it right now. I think that would be really helpful, just as a hint.
No, good point, Candace. And we do actually have some of the accessibility courses courses with the Accessibility Center label on them are actually a collaboration with @ONE. So we are doing some of that now. I think there's always room to do more. And accessibility is it's so important, and it's an area that so many people struggle with because of technical reasons, right? And lack of training, and on and on. So I think that's one of the things we try to do, is make sure that the platforms that are provided, we're always advocating for strict accessibility reviews of those. But when you start to get into content, that's where it can get tricky with making sure that all of your students can access your content equitably. So just to kind of tie that back for a second too, to someone was just mentioning, I'm sorry, someone mentioning a minute ago about sharing content. And I think that's a big takeaway too. If I were going to sit down and design a course or get thrown into teaching a course online right now because of the pivot or to remote, I would really think twice about trying to create all of my own content. I think I would talk to peers. I would look at other sources of content that are reputable, or OER, open educational resources, like we've talked about, and really focus on the interaction element more so than what I know in the past, my inclination has been to focus on the content. How am I going to present that content? But there's just so much content out there now that, particularly when you're looking at creating content and then trying to make it accessible. And we have some great accessibility tools, but you can sort of clear that hurdle. You can find something that someone else did that's brilliant, that's accessible, that you can embed in your course, and then have a really rich conversation about it, right? I just think that's so important.
Thank you all. Unfortunately, I feel like if we ask another question or try to get to the good ones that are still left, we're going to run out of time. So at this moment, I do want to invite our president of FAC, Debbie Klein, to give the closing remarks. But thank you so much to all the attendees. Thank you very much to the panelists, and Debbie will take it from here.
Thank you so much, Carlos, and thank you all. I actually had hoped I would say a few things and then maybe one closing remark for from each panelist also, if we have time for that. I don't want to be the one with the last word. So, I jotted down a few things. This was an amazing dialogue, such a rich conversation. All of you panelists have shared with us your expertise, your wisdom, your experience, your advice, and hope. I feel, to be honest, a little exhausted, but also hopeful. So I thank you for that. We've reached around 200 of our colleagues here today on a Friday afternoon. That's pretty amazing. So I think that also tells us there's probably a chance to have more of these in the near future so we can continue the conversation. So a few thoughts. The future of distance education is here. We are in it. So that is a big takeaway for me. We are all figuring this out as we're going. We're modeling the change as we see it now. I love the idea of moving from a pandemic pedagogy into more inclusive, engaging, and humanizing learning experiences. That's a big takeaway for me. I love the idea of making the technology simple for faculty and students so we can all focus on the subject matter as opposed to the technology itself. I mean, we are all discipline experts and love what we teach. So I don't want us to forget that we love what we teach, and that's why we came to the community colleges so we could be teachers. So I just want us as faculty to remember that we want to share and work with our students in our areas of expertise that we love. So I love remembering that. I love the idea of having peer tutors in our online classes. And I love the idea of incorporating ways to listen to and learn from our students' experiences and feedback. The more we hear from our students, the better teachers we are. And some lingering questions on my mind are, how might we reach our students who chose not to stay enrolled this semester or who might not enroll next semester, even for our late start classes? I'd like to think about that. How might we reach more faculty who may be resistant to transforming their teaching? I think that's a fair. We're being asked, a lot is being asked of us faculty right now. So we might think about that. How can we as leaders and peers encourage each other to be more open-minded, flexible, curious, and enthusiastic about this moment? When I think of us, I think a lot of us do feel a little bit exhausted right now. So thinking about that would, I think, be helpful. Some recommendations that I just thought of while listening that I think FAC as an organization can think about, and these are just momentary. And I'd like to invite all of you who are still here to send me, FAC, out your thoughts on recommendations for the future. A few thoughts I had. Part-time equity issues need to be addressed. You all touched on that briefly. 70% of our faculty are part-time and are less connected with the colleges, the institutions, and the support structures. So how can we think strategically about reaching our part-time faculty? Number two, institutionalized funding for paid professional development, perhaps up to a certain number of paid hours per faculty member per academic year, something like that. A few unions have been negotiating that, actually, like 50 paid hours per faculty or something like that, just in making sure that's equitable. And the next number, connect the need for compensation to our systems conversation about transforming the structures of our system to become more diverse, equitable, and inclusive. This whole DEI conversation that the Board of Governors has approved, that our Chancellor's office is involved in, really has to do with all of the issues we're talking about, especially around access. And the final sort of word I wanted to leave us with is access for faculty and students is an equity issue. thank you so much for letting me have the words, but I think it would be nice to hear from each panelist a final closing thought.
I'll just start off and say thank you, FAC. This advocacy organization is really doing us justice and doing justice for our students. So I'm ecstatic about that.
Thank you to FAC for giving us this opportunity to have this conversation, and thanks to everyone who attended and engaged with us through their questions and their responses. But then also thank you to my fellow panelists. Many of us have worked to help to move these kinds of things forward for a long time, and it's exciting to be able to have this conversation together, and just would like to inspire everyone to continue to do what we can to evolve for our students' benefit.
I was just going to say, I'm so impressed with our faculty and our faculty organizations. FAC, thank you for hosting this and for inviting me to participate with all these phenomenal colleagues. And between FAC, the Senate, the local organizations as well, just the professionalism and the responsiveness and the dedication I've seen from faculty in the last 7-8 months has just been incredible. So kudos to everyone.
Yeah, I just also thank you, and thank you for everyone that asked these really great questions. There's so much good stuff to think about. So this was a really wonderful experience.
Yeah, and I just want to finish with thank you as well. Thank you for all that you guys are doing too. This is not easy. We know it. Like I said, I've been doing this 15 years and it still wasn't easy. So thank you to everyone for all the effort you're putting forth. And I know that our students appreciate it as well.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us on this Friday. Go enjoy the rest of the day. Stay safe, stay healthy. Go vote. Bye, everybody.